Toilets and what we do in them are one of our basic needs, much like food. Yet, unlike food, people talk about it far less and often seem afraid to mention it. Just listen to how the process is named. Attending to natural needs. It sounds like reading out the minutes of an administrative offense. And yet, there are endless jokes about waste, toilets, and relieving oneself. There's an entire genre of toilet humor. That label is, in fact, perfectly official, but it still feels shameful to talk about toilets and what's in them. Even more so, it feels shameful to talk about them seriously, as if your sophistication evaporates the moment you do. For the next 20 minutes or so, though, embarrassment and complexes stay outside. I promise you that. I tried to keep the number of strain jokes to a minimum, and you already know that straining is bad for your health. In this video, we'll run through the chronology 3 times to answer 3 simple questions. Why are we ashamed to use the toilet, and why, when we do it as guests, do we only do it with the tap running in the sink? Not to pee in the sink, we mean turning the water on in the sink. How did humanity invent sewers first and then abandon them later? And finally, where did the separation into M and F come from, and how is this connected to Victorian England? History gives concrete answers to all of these questions. That's what we'll explore. You're watching History's Omitted, where stories don't just get told, they finally get explained. For a long time, mass culture treated the topic of toilets like fire. Showing toilets on screen was considered completely unethical. It seems people have always been embarrassed about excrement, but that's an illusion. Clearly, our distant ancestors in mammoth skins weren't worried about such matters. What's interesting is that shame about excretion did not increase from there. In fact, in many periods, it was simply absent. In ancient Greece, the wealthy used chamber pots that servants carried away, while the poor comfortably fertilized their garden beds with their feces. Today, describing the corner of a house that way is the height of bad taste, or a sign that you happen to be somewhere in Liverpool on a Friday night. But in antiquity, people would see this as normal. Part of that normality included the presence of others during the act itself. You know, it wouldn't hurt to exchange a few words with an acquaintance. So we can confidently say that the school bathrooms without partitions from our childhood are essentially a tribute to ancient culture. Does that mean our ancestors were more immoral than us? Not at all. They simply perceived themselves differently. In Greece and Rome, there was a developed cult of the body. When we enter a gallery of classical sculpture, we see warriors, gods, and Olympic heroes. All of them are nude. To the ancient person, the material body was not something shameful, but a beautiful temple. If your inner world is beautiful, your body will be equally admirable. How, in such conditions, could human excrement be considered disgusting? As the Roman thinker Seneca wrote, "What is natural is not ugly." Sometimes defecation was part of spiritual purification. In ancient Greek theaters, there were special stone seats with holes in the middle. Privileged people took those seats and could cleanse themselves both spiritually and physically. But Christianity put an end to that. In the Old Testament, there is a passage that literally instructs what a person should do with their waste. You shall have a spade, and when you sit outside the camp, dig a hole with it, and again, bury your excrement with it. For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies into your hand. Therefore, your camp must be holy, so he will not see anything indecent among you and turn away from you. Do you feel the contrast with the Greeks? For God, your indecencies are unacceptable. If you don't keep a distance from filth, God might simply turn away. That's the moment shame and embarrassment are born. If it offends higher powers, why shouldn't it offend me too? Anthropologist Ernest Becker wrote that 2 psychological conditions are inherent in us. They are the denial of death and the difficulty of accepting the physical limitations of our bodies. Attending to natural needs clearly belongs to the second. Working with these conditions underlies most ideologies and religions. They give not only faith in life after death, but also the conviction that a glorious world in which man is immortal or all-powerful can come to earth. In almost all religions, the body is mortal, but the soul is infinite. So what is special about Christianity? The body is perceived as a source of sin. All carnal things bear its trace. The soul and its salvation come first. It is therefore not surprising that for many hermits, physical dirt was often seen as a virtue. Baptism was supposed to cleanse a Christian once and for all, in both the literal and figurative sense, and defecation immediately became shameful because it showed the body's imperfection. But when it came to God's earthly representatives, kings and monarchs, rhetoric flipped 180 degrees. These people were so close to God that it was unbecoming for them to visit the toilet. But things only got worse. The number of taboos increased, and Victorian England gave a master class in this. There, it was believed that a woman must always be a true lady, and princes, as we know, do not poop. Men were also expected to show great restraint. Bodily excretions were a source of dreadful shame, and the main tools for coping were self-control and imperturbability. If you couldn't hide your little and big bathroom trips from others, you were weak and clearly lacked tact. So even as religiosity declined and continued to decline in the 19th century, natural processes were still considered disgusting. The sense of shame didn't go away, and that's exactly how toilet humor works. We are so ashamed of other people's embarrassing incidents when they tell how they barely passed a driving test that the awkwardness becomes funny. For a long time, people thought that if a comedy didn't include a toilet gag, its script could be flushed down the bowl. But aside from the moral side, there was also a technical one. People only recently obtained the opportunity to be alone with their porcelain friend. Let's talk about how things came to be this way. When the first people began to form large settled communities, cities appeared. Life was booming, trade thrived, but there was a problem. What to do with all that shit? You could ignore it and crap wherever you liked, just not in your house. But it soon became clear. Beyond the smell, unsanitary conditions spawn epidemics. Life in a city becomes deadly until the waste problem is solved. That led to one of humanity's most important inventions, the sewer system. Put simply, it's a system that brings water to people and carries away the byproducts of life somewhere far from them. In essence, sewerage and civilization are synonyms. One cannot exist without the other. The true masters of sewerage were the Romans. They built sewers into the city already in the age of kings before the Republic. They called it the Great Cloaca, and it still functions today. Here is what it looks like next to one of the bridges on the Tiber embankment. The Romans were genuinely obsessed with toilet matters. They even invented a goddess of the sewers, Cloacina. Later, they merged her with a goddess of love, Venus. Sewer and love, how about that? Harder to imagine is a god of excrement and manure. Yet the Romans had him, called Sterputius. Early Christians endlessly mocked him. How could anyone believe in something so revolting? But back to the point. Thanks to powerful sewage, the Romans built a system of public toilets across the city. These were halls with very long pits, with special holes. By the 2nd century AD, there were nearly 150 such toilets in Rome, where up to 50 people could sit at the same time. We remember that group defecation did not embarrass the Romans. More than that, they turned public toilets into places for discussing important matters and even making deals. No discomfort, no shame, only business. By the way, the famous phrase is connected with public toilets. The Emperor Vespasian decided to tax them. When he was told it was indecent to collect money from such important facilities, he brought a coin to his nose and pronounced his famous "money does not stink." When privacy was desired, Romans used chamber pots made of clay, but social stratification soon appeared. People cared what kind of pot they filled. The wealthy had urine vessels of silver and gold, and Roman law even regulated how these vessels would pass by inheritance. When Rome fell, the West forgot about sanitation. Public toilets became rare, and sewers fell into disrepair. People regained the legal right to relieve themselves wherever they pleased. The so-called Dark Ages lasted chronologically from the 5th to the 15th century, and in terms of hygiene, it was even worse. Proper sewer systems did not return until the 19th century. How did people live in such conditions? Very simply. In large cities of developed countries, the main streets were paved, but the gutters for waste were open trenches running parallel to the road. People could freely defecate onto the street, though most were slightly more civilized and did it at home. Chamber pots survived the fall of Rome. Waste was simply poured out, often through the window. By the way, wide-brimmed hats, loved by many, appeared not only to protect from the sun, but also from falling filth. If something flew out the window, the chance it would hit your face, and thus bring you great luck and money, was reduced. In France at that time, they invented very high-heeled shoes so as not to step into filth. You might say these were common folk and dirty people. In luxurious feudal castles, birds sang angelically, and excrement could usually be found only in the stables. But even castles lacked sewage. Medieval sanitation was equalizing, either the chamber, pot, or direct disposal from the castle walls. All waste flowed either into the adjacent settlement or into a moat. Need I say that a fetid moat was a highly effective defense against potential enemies? There were other tricks. Sometimes they dug huge cesspits under castle floors. On the one hand, convenient, everything close at hand, but on the other hand, accidents could happen. During one reception, the castle floor collapsed under the crowd. Noble guests, along with Emperor Barbarossa himself, fell waist deep into excrement, and worse. The pit was about 10 meters deep. The emperor was rescued, but several dozen guests met a heroic end in that pool. By the way, Barbarossa later died by drowning in a river, not in shit. Castles, contrary to myth, were centers of insanitation. In the luxurious Versailles of the Sun, King Louis XIV, there was not a single toilet room. For the king, they made a special chair with an opening and a chamber pot beneath it, so he could close a screen and attend to his needs without leaving the hall. Ladies had it worse. The 18th century was the era of voluminous dresses. To be dressed in such an outfit could take hours. Now imagine trying to relieve yourself in that getup. Women needed assistance. Gallant cavaliers helped their ladies to chamber pots, lifted skirts, and assisted them to sit down so no one missed and overturned the pot. The world population grew, and so did the waste. Something had to be done. Mid-9th century, London not only choked on factory smoke, but also drowned in filth. Population rose from 1 to 3 million in 50 years, and London's meager sewage could not cope. All waste flowed straight into the Thames. Progress simply ignored the toilet sphere. Compare the flow capacities of 1st century Rome and 19th century London. In the 1st century BC, the Great Cloaca delivered about 1,400 liters per person per day. In London, the figure was 6 times smaller, 232 liters. But finally, a breakthrough came. The first flushing toilet, invented by Thomas Crapper, appeared in the year of Pushkin's death. Access to this marvel remained limited. People continued to use chamber pots. As a result, London and other world capitals were shaken by recurring cholera epidemics. Tens of thousands died. Doctors sounded the alarm. The city simply had to be saved from permanent plague. And that's what Dr. Snow did. The real John Snow was not some noble bastard. His father was a simple coalman. During the 1853 London outbreak, Snow realized the culprit wasn't the awful smell, but fecal matter poisoning drinking water. Understand that in the most advanced city in the world at that time, drinking water and sewer flows were not properly separated. Thanks to Snow's discovery, they were finally separated, and flush toilets began to gain popularity. Toilet paper followed its own path to success. Modern rolls appeared in Germany in the late 1920s. If not for the creator's marketing skill, the clever finishing touch, they might not have taken off. Even in the early 20th century, people were ashamed to even buy toilet paper. To overcome this psychological barrier, marketers launched a slogan: "Ask for our rolls, and you don't have to say toilet paper out loud." It worked. Let's return briefly to Roman public toilets. One detail I didn't mention: there was no separation into male and female in those latrines. There was a different division, class-based. If the poor had simple holes and benches, for the wealthy stone slabs were preheated by special slaves. Japanese heated toilets had nothing on that. So why did separation into male and female toilets appear later? Why didn't it bother anyone before? Again, we point to the Christian concept of shame. Viewing the naked bodies of the opposite sex, except for spouses, of course, was strictly condemned. The desire to separate male and female spheres wherever possible became an important element of Christian civilization. In the Middle Ages, the problem with public toilets resolved itself. No sewers, no toilets, no problem. But by the 18th century, things began to change radically. In 1739, at a Parisian ball, a novelty was presented. Public cubicle toilets divided by gender. Attendants stood by the stalls to show which way to go depending on your sex. People were astonished. It was strange, eccentric, and even amusing. The Enlightenment crowd simply could not comprehend it. Why partition toilet space? Those were experiments at first. 100 years later, the World's Fair took place, effectively a competition of leading countries in inventions and architecture. Britain showcased the Crystal Palace, a huge iron and glass building. It doesn't survive to our day, but the London football club Crystal Palace commemorates its name. What was remarkable inside? Exoticism. A public restroom with flush toilets separated for men and women. The Victorian era in England consolidated this vital moral norm. But other trends also gained strength, including biological ones. Man began to be seen as an animal not so different from other mammals. The man was perceived as a predator, the woman as a fragile creature who needed protection. Such views became mainstream in the mid-19th century, and as a result, the process of restricting women's labor began. They were prohibited from certain kinds of work, but at the same time, someone decided to create a place where women would be safe and could fix their appearance. That place became the toilet. Meanwhile, women were increasingly refusing the role of housekeeper and seeking work. The emergence of women from domestic roles led to the creation of female spaces. A working woman needed her own place to relieve herself. The gender division became logically inevitable. It was changes in women's social role, not morality itself, that drove it. Morality remained the same, Christian in nature. The result was the classic picture. A door marked M and a door marked F. Over time, attitudes to relieving oneself changed from era to era. The process that began with the sexual revolution of the 1,960 seconds liberated other areas as well. People began to feel more relaxed about their bodies and their waist. Perhaps we are headed toward an ancient body culture too. Maybe toilet humor will one day remain popular mainly with children. But for now, neither you nor I can resist laughing at poop jokes. After all, it's one of the few things that makes everyone equal. If you found this interesting, subscribe to the channel and share this video with friends and colleagues who aren't eating right now. A new video is coming soon.